Will the soundtrack kindly produce a sound? Go on. Don't be nervous. Go ahead. Any sound. Well, that isn't quite what I had in mind.
You mean me feeling?
I was saying like, I guess it all started with this message you heard from Dallas Willard, right?
Oh yeah. So, gosh, I wish I could talk like he does.
Yeah.
But basically, Dallas Willard was talking about how in our institutions of knowledge that we recognize as a people as being the highest form, like colleges and universities, basically,
Yeah.
have, through the process of secularism, basically rejected or stepped away from the idea that you can have moral knowledge or knowledge about morality. So, like making certain distinctions between right and wrong as like a knowledge you could have with the rise of relativism.
Yeah, for sure.
So
that makes sense.
He talks about like, you don't want to go to your dentist and have your dentist say, well, it looks like you have some cavities on this tooth, but we're just really not sure which one to pull. So we might just pick one. That'd be a little ridiculous. You'd want to get out of it.
Yeah, for sure.
And he makes those connections between that and kind of how the attitude towards moral knowledge is right now, especially in institutions, which has bled into society. And I feel that a lot, where it's like, I'm almost a little afraid to make moral distinctions about certain things or moral claims, or claim to have moral knowledge about something. And you see that in culture where it's a little bit more pervasive now than ever, where people are afraid to say, for sure this is wrong.
Yeah,
or I see this is right.
I see where you're going with this.
So
yeah,
he starts off that way and then really starts to make a distinction between making a judgment and making it a condemnation. Mm-hmm. And he brings it back to the dentist example, saying like, you would hope that your dentist would say, hey, this tooth has a big cavity in it, and because of that, we're going to pull it.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. I appreciate the dentist making that judgment.
Yes.
It's not a bad thing. Now, what if he makes that judgment and then slaps you across the face and starts harassing you for not brushing your teeth? Well, that wouldn't be so nice.
Right.
And that would be condemnation for you not taking care of your teeth. Yeah. And so that really helped me, because in my own like personal development, I'm not very, naturally, I'm not very prone to challenging. Like, I don't wake up every day like, man, who can I be contrarian against today?
Yeah.
I'm really more of like a go with the flow for the most part. And I think our society today would maybe categorize that as like being a nice guy. And so I'm going to kind of use that phrase just because it's easier to talk about. But I don't mean like nice without a backbone. I think guys who are categorized as nice guys just have a longer fuse.
Yeah, for
sure. Like a much longer fuse. But when that fuse gets there, dude, it's like bad. Yeah. It's really bad. Yeah, because it just takes forever to get there.
Yeah.
And so, but I think there's a difference between like fuse as in like an anger fuse and fuse as in like a challenging fuse.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I felt like I had kind of got to the end of my challenging fuse, and I was like ready to really challenge some things last week, and at the sacrifice of my own image. And that's been probably like one of my biggest fears. That has been one of my biggest fears. And so I realized that I had been operating under the subconscious belief that making a moral judgment was bringing condemnation. And in fact, I found that there were some people that the way that they reacted to what I had to say confirmed that they also believe the same thing. And so I'm starting to realize that, like, of course you have the caveat of anyone who feels like they're being challenged or could be feeling like they're being threatened. And so you have that aspect of like a personal attack if they feel that way. But I think there's also an aspect of, in the church world specifically, people don't like to be challenged. And they often feel like there's this sort of nice guy, pervasive attitude throughout church where you have like everyone can kind of feel it. It's this surface level, oh, hey, how you doing? I'm going to like walk around the topic I'm really trying to talk about. I'm not going to really talk blatantly because that's not a part of like the law, right? And so I really felt like, without getting into everything, I just felt like I broke a lot of laws. And I think that there were definitely some things I could have done better for sure. But the point of what I'm trying to say is, even though I felt like I wasn't coming across as condemning and I was coming across as challenging, I wonder if churches or people in general care to make that distinction. Because according to Proverbs, a wise man is someone who's easily rebuked. And so that's what I was wrestling with this weekend of like, can you be both easily rebuked and also confident in the judgments that you've made or the distinctions that you've made, if judgments is too harsh of a word? And I think you can. So I've been kind of holding that tension together, but like personally, the last 3 months have been really difficult for me and have really taken me out of my comfort zone perpetually. And so it just took me to this place of like, I really just don't care anymore. And that gave me the confidence and the courage to be able to kind of get out of my shell, like that sort of nice guy, comfortable shell that I stay in a lot. And it's a really powerful thing, I think, when that happens, but it's not perfect.
Yeah.
So I know I just kind of threw a lot out there, but.
Okay. So I want to back up a little bit. Where you said that you felt as though you said something about, you said like there's the difference between condemnation and judgment, right? And you said that, what was it that you said that you felt like they had the same belief?
Oh,
you said
I felt like they couldn't distinguish between condemnation and judgment.
And you felt the same way?
I felt the same way that I couldn't verbalize it until this weekend. But I was like referencing back to conversations I had with people who disagreed with what I said and how I said it, even though I was coming from a place of, I felt like it was challenging.
Or in other words, a moral judgment.
I'm making a moral judgment.
Okay.
I felt like I was making a moral judgment. They took it as bringing condemnation.
Yeah. Okay.
And so my question was, well, okay, what's the difference between maybe like being dishonoring or condemning versus being challenging? Where's the distinction between those two things? And I think that's a really tough question because then you get a lot of people's feelings involved.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, it's just difficult. It's just difficult. No one likes to necessarily be, attacked. Right?
Yeah.
But it's like,
well, I think even more than that, I mean, no one likes to be wrong. I mean, to admit that as a human being, to admit that you are wrong, but just to say like, yeah, I'm wrong, dude. That is one of the hardest things to do.
True.
And so then when you factor in an entire belief system that's like ingrained into you, Or and then on another level, an entire belief system that you teach to hundreds, thousands of people yourself, like that's, I mean, what's tough, dude, is that even still, everything that we talked about with church and this whole struggle between like the body of Christ and, like a little C church, whatever, there are still times when I'm like, I have to sit back and just think like, God, okay, like, am I wrong here?
Dude,
like, am I wrong?
Like, I'm almost to the point where I'll gladly be wrong if I could not feel so like alienated.
Yeah.
Like, put me back in the system. Like, I'll be in the system if you want me to be, Lord. Like,
yes. But then the problem is like, I go to scripture and then I go, to church, to services, whatever. And it's like, I just see this tension that doesn't necessarily line up.
So, okay. So then I took it from I took to another place of, if we're trying to live more like Jesus, then let's look at how he lived.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like Jesus challenged people in a way that did not come across as very nice. Like, literally came across as kind of mean.
Yeah, it's very true.
Really and truly. And you have to always make the caveat of like, you're not trying to compare yourself to Jesus as a perfect person.
Yeah.
But you are trying to emulate the way that he lived.
Mm-hmm.
And so if Jesus literally walked into his hometown, probably his home synagogue, in front of his family and friends from being a little kid, from pretty much his rabbis, like Pharisee rabbis, and just to read the Isaiah scroll and say, I'm this guy, I'm him.
Yeah.
And then for them to be like, oh, you realize we have to like throw you off a cliff now because it's blasphemy.
Yeah.
You have that scene, which you reminded me of. And then you have also all the other scenes throughout scripture where Jesus is challenging the status quo of the current law. And it just so happens that the teachers of that law happen to be Pharisees.
Yeah.
And so he challenged them in a way that they hated him.
Yeah.
And so, but he did it out of perfect love and truth versus we can't do it out of perfect love and truth, but we can do our best. And I think that's the differentiation of, you're never going to do it perfectly the way he did. And so, we have some biblical models for handling conflict, yes, but at what point do you just kind of like shake the tree a little bit and see what comes out? Because I know that like someone like Martin Luther probably felt for a long time as a priest that things were not right. He probably really wrestled like back and forth about what he should do. And, he was a character, but he got to a certain point where he was just like, I cannot basically live with myself living this way anymore. And became a great reformer because he was willing to disrupt the narrative and make a lot of people angry.
Yeah. And
so I think the nice guy, what I call like nice guy ethics or nice guy morality is I say we because I feel like you and I are both perceived as nice guys.
Yeah.
I think a principle of nice guy ethics is don't rock the boat. Because if you rock the boat, bad things happen. People get hurt. Trust gets broken, maybe. People will misunderstand you. So do everything you can to not be misunderstood. And I realized I was operating under that belief.
Yeah, I feel like I'm almost afraid to hurt somebody.
Yes.
Like I don't, even though like I would even though I believe I'm speaking truth or making a moral judgment, whatever, it's I'm fearful of hurting that person directly.
Mm.
Even if they're only hurt because that's how they took it.
Yes. And I think that is the difficult part, where it's like,
That is the difficult part.
I mean, gosh, even Jesus, he had the power to have everyone hear what he said and not be hurt. He could have literally done that, but he decided to leave us with our free will. And I think that that's what I'm wrestling with is, what are the metrics by which you measure the things that you say versus how they are interpreted by other people?
Yeah.
Because, we don't want to get to this point, Zach, where we're so gung-ho about kingdom living that we leave a slew of carcasses in our wake.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because then we're just as guilty. Because it's a matter of the heart and not treating people with contempt, but doing so out of love. But I think it's difficult because we have this warped view of love in our society, where we think that love means you don't challenge, you don't contradict, you don't, you just fall in line. I think that's another nice guy ethic, nice guy principle, ethical principle, is you go with the flow.
Yeah.
Right? As to not disrupt. Yeah. And so I'm kind of finding myself at odds within me, where part of me is seeing maybe the areas that I didn't do well and showing okay, I see how I could have come across that way. I see how I didn't handle this as effectively. And there's another part of me that's I have no control over that, of how other people perceive me. Well, at the end of the day, I can do my best.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I won't have any control if they perceive me one way or the other.
Yeah.
And so I've noticed that even in the church, there's not necessarily a great open atmosphere to be challenged. It really feels like we've been brought up in a way that if we challenge the authority that is in the organized church, then by which we're challenging God.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's actually more of a cult principle.
Well, yeah, for sure.
Because I think I think about Paul and how many times he was challenged. And he was it seemed to me that he had an attitude of, okay, you can challenge me, but I'm going to write you another freaking letter and give my case.
Yeah.
He gave his case. And I think sometimes in the church world, especially, we have people that are well, you should just take what I say at will. And it's well, I'm not, by challenging you, I'm not disrespecting you. I'm not trying to bring condemnation or whatever. I'm just simply asking, could you see it from another perspective? Or could you see that in some areas this causes other people to follow a certain law rather than live in the kingdom? But it's difficult because, if you've invested so much time into a church, or you've, you lived so much in this organization, that the idea of it partly being mistaken or whatever is extremely threatening to your worldview.
Yeah.
And that's one thing going to SAGU that really helped me, was realizing that I didn't have to be threatened by my worldview changing.
100%.
That was one of the biggest things I felt like I got from SAGU, my education there.
Yeah.
And not everyone's going to just be that open to their world being destroyed or changed or whatever.
That's a big thing that I feel like going and getting an education, or I don't know. That was what was really helpful for me too, dude. When being trained under my professors, that's what dude, I'm super thankful that I believe we had some of the best professors in probably the world, dude. Probably the world.
They were freaking top notch.
Yeah. Especially while we were there. And they taught in a way where you truly were able to remove emotion and kind of look at things analytically and just lay it out. Okay, which one if you have two sides, like which one has the most evidence? Which one has the most support? Like, and it's that simple. It's just that simple.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, I mean, it takes a lot to get there. It takes a lot to put aside all of your what do you call it? Your
preconceived notion.
Yeah. There's a specific word for that though. Whatever. Yeah, preconceived notions. But I have wrestled with that too, dude. For a while, I wrestled with that. Like everything that we're talking about, to try to, if you really want to make a change, or even if you want to make like a public moral judgment, what is the best way to do that? Do you go this is like what I was talking about with you, the Puritan route or the separatist route. Like you had the Puritans who knew that the church was failing, but the Puritans wanted to purify the church. They wanted to change it from within. But then you had the separatists who were like, nah, it's too far gone. So they just like, we're just completely done. And they just went their own way. And so it was actually the separatists that they were the ones, like I told you, they were the pilgrims. They were the ones that came over like the Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's like, if you really want to make a change, like, what do? Do you go full Martin Luther, and do I just like leave a paper on my church's door? I'm like, hey, this is like everything you guys are doing wrong. The good thing is that nowadays the consequences for that, I feel like, are far less severe.
Yeah, I mean, he literally could have been burned at the stake.
I mean, yeah,
easily.
Yeah. I feel like nowadays the worst you'll get is like just kicked out, probably.
Mm-hmm.
But still, the problem remains of how do you bring change without, or I guess really the problem is what you're getting down to is, what is the best way to help people feel like they're not being condemned?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's how do you make moral judgments with love?
Yes. I read I was listening to a podcast today, and this dude, do you know Eric Weinstein? You ever heard of him?
Wait, I saw him. He debated Terrence
Howard.
Dude,
Yeah.
that was amazing.
You listened to it?
I just saw a clip. I just saw like one clip.
Okay.
I was like, this needed to happen.
I'm only like halfway through it.
Really?
But in like the first 5 minutes, he said this. And I was like, and he just said it just like, just casual conversation. But I was like, holy crap, that is so profound. He said, I cannot critique a man if I haven't built a model of what he's actually saying in my own mind that he agrees with.
Dude. That's so true.
Dude.
That is so true.
Like, that just like blew my mind. I was like, holy crap. Because that is the problem. Okay, because dude, this problem that you're talking about, this is not just a church problem. This is a freaking America problem. This is like a cultural problem. You have Democrats and Republicans. You have freaking left versus right. It's like, how do you find common ground?
Yeah.
And like, even if, you have the conservative versus the liberal, like whichever side you think is right, how do you make a moral judgment without the other person feeling attacked? Because like it feels like everyone just wants to be attacked almost. Like everyone wants a reason to be upset. But in order to, just like what Eric Weinstein said, like that's such a key component to having an actual conversation. And this is what we talked about with Second Floor, dude. Like from the very beginning, is being able to have conversations with people who don't believe or think like we do, who don't see the world like we do. And how do you do that? Like, what's the key to doing that? And to even have a relationship with that person. And so, I mean, dude, so far with their debate, like, I've been so impressed how polite they both are to each other and how like respectful they are. They're having like an actual genuine conversation.
Wow.
No one's like laughing at each other. Really, it's just like, it's very respectful. And so, and I think that is because of the way Eric Weinstein is approaching the conversation. It's because he's trying to
Understand.
He goes in with the knowledge of like, okay, I know all these scientists, all these mathematicians who are just laughing off Terrence Howard, right? Just like completely don't even give his ideas a thought. Just like, okay, you're crazy or whatever. And he's like, I have a real problem with that because like, and he said that comment. He's like, until I've created a model of his idea in my own mind that he agrees with, basically, until I can actually basically what it's saying is until I can understand actually what you're saying, I can't critique you. So it's like, gosh, the reason why there's so much hostility within these like debates or challenges or whatever you want to call it, is because that key component is lacking, or the other side has to be willing to make an effort to understand what you're saying. And that goes both ways. Like for us to present all these ideas to a pastor or to anyone, right, who might disagree with us, we have to be willing to, if they have an argument against us, it'd be foolish of us just to laugh it off.
Yeah.
Or just to disregard it, because even if like we are both like biblically educated, even if like I'm in a conversation with somebody who doesn't have the biblical degree that I have, like for me just to blow off their ideas or their arguments, or whatever, it would just be one that's very disrespectful, but it's not fair to the argument. And it serves like, it doesn't help anyone find the truth.
No.
So,
gosh, that's such a good point. And that process can often take hours.
Yes.
Like, that's real work,
dude.
To ask question after question, be like, wait, okay, clarify this. So you're saying exactly this? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
From there, what are you saying? And you got to go like piece by piece, and it's a lot harder than just saying you're wrong. It's an easy way out. It's a coward's way out. It's a lazy person's way out of it. It's a personal attack.
Yeah,
it's a disregard.
And he says right after that. I kind of wish I would have written this part down too. But he says that like, not only will they not do that, like they'll just disregard it, but then you kind of infer your own ideas of what you think they're saying when it might not be what they're saying at all. So that would be like us, saying everything, our whole whiteboard podcast. And, we're talking about how the body of Christ is not the same as the church building, right?
Yeah.
Like the big C church is not the same as the little C church. And so, but then if someone, it would be like what I just said previously. It would be like someone taking that and saying, "Oh, like you just want to, what, should we just destroy all the church buildings? Like, should we just not have any church services? Like,
I guess you guys are just deconstructionists."
Exactly. They're inferring their own ideas. So it's like, no. Like, that's not what we're saying. You're not actually listening to what I'm saying.
Yes.
So that's the problem.
That's the problem. And I think not everyone is going to accept that, which we understand. But we do believe that if there is an environment that is more conducive for that kind of interaction, it will happen more often. And I think podcasts are a great start to that, because it really gives you the long form ability to flesh out your ideas.
Yeah.
And hopefully you're talking to someone who really helps you flesh out those ideas. And the best ones are the ones that don't make you feel bad, even if they disagree.
Yeah.
The best ones are the ones that are like, okay, well, what do you mean by that exactly? And they're not trying to lure you into a trap. I mean, they're genuinely, and I think, dude, holy crap. I think that's love. I think that's moral knowledge with love, is when you're trying to understand someone's position, you're genuinely going about it in a way to understand them and not a way just to tell them they're wrong.
Very true.
I think coming about it in a way that's like genuinely trying to understand their position because you respect them as a person, I think works wonders for the conversation itself and the attitude of the other person, and it really sets the tone.
Yeah.
Because if not, the other person feels threatened and they're going to try to defend themselves because they don't want to be wrong.
Yeah.
Right? And they feel misunderstood. And that's exactly how I felt, Zach. I felt misunderstood. And I wonder if there's a way to invite people to understand what we're saying without feeling threatened. And I think that's the difficult part, is that there's going to be people that simply do not care enough to really listen. But there's also going to be people that do.
Yeah.
And so you can't really discount, I think, to love in that sense, you can't discount either of them. But that tension, I think, is what is so difficult for me personally, is to say, that there's there's an imperfection about myself that I will never be able to communicate this with perfect truth and love.
Mm-hmm.
And so, starting off by saying, forgive my imperfection, but I want to try to explain this in a way that makes sense or doesn't threaten your livelihood or whatever, comes across as loving. And I'm not going to do that perfectly, but that's, I think, what Paul means by, we can agree to disagree. You're doing it out of love. So, okay, we can agree to disagree out of love, sure. But that was I think that's been my frustration is I'm trying to take it on myself of, can I communicate well enough that I'm not misunderstood? But I think that's kind of like a no outlet kind of route there.
Yeah. That's what's tough, is that, I mean, that's the thing, is that like we'll never be in control of how a person is going to receive anything that we say.
Yeah.
No matter, it doesn't matter our intent, I mean, I guess, obviously we have a little bit of control.
Yeah.
But I think with most things like that, I mean, maybe the best way is just being that type of person yourself, like exemplifying that yourself, at least trying to. So the way I see that is, if, I don't know, I guess when presenting these thoughts and these ideas to someone that we know we disagree with, whatever, like, I just think that whatever pushback they have, whatever arguments they have against us, I think the fair thing to do is for us to, just like what I said, is to genuinely consider them and say, okay, let's walk me through this thought. Like, walk me through this argument of yours, and let's see if it holds up to Scripture. And it's that simple. So then, I mean, then it kind of takes it off of you and puts it onto them.
Yeah.
And they have to justify what they're saying.
I totally agree. And I often find asking that question leads me to a much better critique.
Yeah.
Like, because first of all, it gives me a second to think.
Yeah.
And second of all, it puts the responsibility on them to specify their ideas, which I think that the whole thing about this, Zach, is there are a lot of people who don't even know what they believe. And that they're just operating off of other people's beliefs that they've taken on.
Yeah.
That's what I realized when I went to SAGU. I was like, oh, I've just picked a hodgepodge of beliefs and been like, yeah, I believe this, but I don't really know what I'm believing.
Yeah.
And SAGU forced me to figure out not only what are you believing, but why are you believing it?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think a lot of people do that. And so, I mean, that's like radically important, because if you can't articulate that, then you almost can't have like a civilized conversation with someone you disagree with, because you'll always feel threatened.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You know that you don't really know what you're talking about. So
Yeah.
if we can provide a place that encourages people that, hey, it's literally safe here if you like are questioning things, you don't know things, you feel like you're insecure or inadequate about your certain positions or whatever, intellectually or emotionally, I don't know. But to have a place like that that's truly genuine, I think would be such a gift to the to people, to the world.
Yeah.
And
yeah, dude. I remember, I mean, I guess just to give like a personal example, I've told you about like in high school, or I guess late high school, then going into SAGU, I was, that's when I discovered this whole thing with the tithe.
Yeah.
And like, all these things that I was kind of discovering. I was doing, my own like personal research in the Bible, and obviously the things I was learning at SAGU had a pretty huge influence. And so it was really starting to affect the way I was seeing the church, and I was starting to see the church in a very like, honestly, like a very deconstructionist way.
Yeah.
Like, maybe not, I don't know if I was like committed to the idea, but I was like, I was very new to all this, very, in a way, like immature with these ideas. And so it was just all, like, oh my gosh, like, is the entire church like corrupt? Like, is the entire church just...
You have that pendulum swinging.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And so, every time I would go home for like summer, winter breaks or whatever, and I would have these conversations with my parents. And there were a lot of times where my mom would get really upset, like, because she would argue that there's a lot of good that these church buildings, these church organizations do. And she just argued like pretty heavily. I think she still would, that, just doing away with all these organizations, institutions, whatever, would not be the best idea. It would probably, it might do more harm than good. Right. And so it took me like a couple of years, I think, to really, I don't know, I guess, accept what she was saying. Because I think that in a way that she was right. Like, there were times where I would just kind of get just upset, like, with the organization, right, the institution. Like, it was just very, I just pointed my finger a lot. You know what I mean? Like, the church does this wrong, the church does this wrong, they do this wrong. Like, how come they don't do this right, or whatever. And so for the longest time, she would remind me, like, all you're doing is you're just pointing fingers, Zach. Like, you gotta, basically, like, are you gonna stand on this?
Yeah.
You're
gonna put your money where your mouth is.
And dude, that, bro, I got another wild quote. bro.
I love this quote, like tangent.
Dude,
and
I have been on a quote like train.
you have.
And like I've never been that person.
No.
Like, over the past year, like, it's been,
You literally told me to my face, I've never been a quote guy.
yeah.
That's what you said like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And
And
all
now
of a
it's
sudden,
like,
I love it. I think it's
Dude,
great.
it's-
I've always loved quotes.
we'll get this one, bro. I'm gonna read you this. I'm gonna tell you where I got it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So it says, it is easier to fight for principles than to live up to them. Dude. It's easier to fight for principles than to live up to them.
Oh,
Yeah, that one rocks me, bro. You know where I got that?
Where?
A fortune cookie at a Chinese buffet.
You're lying.
Dude, I'm not lying, bro. I'm not lying.
Not the fortune cookie actually like
Dude,
rising up
dropping
to
bombs?
its claims
Yeah.
of
I read that and I was like,
fame.
holy crap, this is insane.
Wow.
But anyways, that's what I was saying. That's essentially what my mom was telling me, right? Like, and so it just kind of forced me to think back in my life and think like, dang, okay. I mean, dude, I was raised in the church. Like I was raised literally, like I don't remember not being inside the church organization. Like I don't remember. I've been born and raised in it. And I don't have like any regrets in my life, you know, like I'm thankful for the life that I have. There's a lot of good things that I have learned from the church, from people in the church, right? Like,
Me too.
so that was where I had to make that, like, you know, I had to take on that principle of
Yeah.
understanding what she's saying, like genuinely considering it. And then I had to, like, you know, make a correction in the way I was thinking, because I don't think that's the right thing to do. It's just to, like, at least I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, to go full deconstructionist.
yeah,
mode.
yeah.
agree,
And
yeah.
that's like what we've been talking about this whole time, is like we don't want to become that, because we both feel like that's not, the results of that just wouldn't be very positive.
And I think two things can be true. Like, I think that I look back on my life as well, and how many great things came out of me being actively involved in the church organization. There were many good things,
Yeah.
for sure. And I don't think you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Mm.
I think you really can say that God works through imperfect systems,
100%. Yeah.
but that doesn't justify the imperfection.
100%.
And I think that's what you're trying to say.
Yes. Yes. Like, with that understanding, with that correction, like I had to make within my attitude towards this organization, that doesn't mean that, like, I still don't feel as though I can just sit by and watch these things happen that I don't feel like are okay, that I don't think are necessarily biblical. And I experienced a lot of those things growing up in the church. Like, there was some negative things and a lot of positive things, but what you're saying is that that doesn't mean you can just let the negative things slide. Right.
Yeah. And I think we also kind of have sometimes we have this grand vision idea that, like, if everyone lived by, kingdom principles, then there would be, no more imperfection. But that, again, it would be another fallacy. It would be saying that, like, just by doing, if we just do another version of this, like, it's going to be all better.
Right.
I don't think that's true either. Right? It's like there's always going to be, there's not this utopia until we get to heaven.
No.
Like,
yeah.
heaven's the perfect utopia, right? But, like, until we get there, you're just going to have to work with what you got. But it doesn't mean that you don't work on what you got. Like, the church system we have today is what we have. It's what we've got to work with.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean you should stop working with it.
Yeah.
And I think some people are just like, well, this is just the way it is. And it's like, that's a terrible reason to not do anything about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think a lot of times this goes back to the let the pastor do it mentality that we
Yes.
have is when you challenge pastors with this notion, they feel very threatened. One, because they're shepherding this organization, these people, but two, because we've put so much pressure on the pastors to be CEOs, to be leadership developers, to be pastors, shepherds. Like, we've asked this one group of giftings to be multiple things. And it's just really, honestly, too much pressure to put on one person.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I think it really leads to them feeling like failures if they don't sort of measure up to these kingdom principles, or even their like congregation doesn't measure up, or their church organization doesn't measure up to it. They feel personally attacked. And it's like, well, maybe you feel that way, like you feel like you're not doing enough as a pastor because you've been living by this idea that the pastor is responsible for doing everything. But where does that come up?
Yeah.
And the lay people are just as much as at fault for this because they feed into that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gives the pastor some kind of purpose. And so then he feeds into it too. And so it's up to both sides. It's up to the lay people and the pastors to the lay people stop saying things like, well, that's what he gets paid for. And he should be doing that. And it's like passing off their responsibility as passive spectators to their pastors to have their faith, to fast for them, to pray for them, to handle religious matters like a lawyer does for his organization, handles law. We've passed on religious matters to our pastors to handle our religion for us, our relationship with God for us. And we've got to stop that. And I think that will then take pressure off of the pastors of feeling like they have to like be the ones to do this whole thing and feel like there's a special responsibility on them. Like, yeah, like you're seeing in a different light for sure. But that I think has an adverse effect of disempowering the lay people of being disciples.
Yeah.
And so I think we got to maybe approach it from a different point of view when we challenge maybe particularly pastors or leaders of the church. Because I think the good ones are so worried about this responsibility that they're carrying that they might go into fight or flight when they're challenged by these things. And so maybe some caveats would be in order before doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. What? I mean, what frustrates me, dude, I guess this is kind of like a complaint, but I'm just going to say it. Like, what frustrates me is that a lot of times you'll hear something like this from a pastor where it's like, oh, let's say in your case, it's like, what you said, like, you're just criticizing us. You're just condemning us, right? Like they receive it as that. But it's like, how many times they're up there on stage and like, how many times, I don't know, I guess this maybe it's just like a whole other conversation. But it brings me back to like what I told you, how it like really bothers me when pastors try so hard to guilt trip a congregation, right? By like saying these, I don't know, these like one-liners that are supposed to like convict you or whatever. And I feel like there's no difference between that and even if we were like condemning them. Right? Like,
I see what you're saying.
I don't know.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. I think it's
like, like how many times I've been in a service where the pastor like goes out of their way to try to make the congregation feel convicted and get those hands raised, right?
Yeah. When it's the Holy
But, like,
Spirit's job.
Yeah. And I mean, guilt tripping is, it's, I think it's the same thing as condemning. Like, if you're guilt tripping someone, you're trying to make them feel wrong for something. And it's like, I don't think there's much different than, I don't think that's much different than condemning. So it's like, I don't know. That just frustrates me. It just frustrates me that you can't play both sides, you know?
Yeah.
You can't be the condemner and then turn around and be the victim at the same time.
No, that's a valid pushback for sure.
But then again, that's me just pointing fingers, you know? That's me just pointing fingers.
Well, let's end on a high note, shall we?
Yeah.
I feel like from some of the feedback that I did get, there really was partly a positive response.
Yeah.
And that gives me hope. You know, it really does.
Yeah. Do you want to like, just like very shallowly, is that a word? Shallowly describe like what happened? So there's some kind of reference.
Sure. So
You say that like we presented these ideas to a group of people. Right?
Yeah, we knew. And I will say that I feel like I didn't do the best job of I don't know. I didn't do the best job. It was very much a calculated risk. Let's just put it that way. And the way that it went about, I would not necessarily do that again. I would not recommend that. I do feel like it did have wrong implications for sure. And because of that, I feel like the message itself didn't have as much of an impact as it could have because of the way it was gone about. However, I also know that probably would not have gotten approved.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think that it would have had as much of an impact as it did if I had tried to condense it in another form. But yeah, so like I said earlier, there were some areas where I felt like I didn't do well, and I presented imperfectly in that sense, and I learned from it, you know, for sure. And I'm still holding that tension at the same time of they were
standing by what you said.
Standing by what I said.
Yeah.
And I think that's the nice guy ethic that I was finally broken over, or if I finally broke over, was like, it's either completely right or completely wrong. Like if people are upset, then it's wrong. Like if one person comes up to you or two people come up to you and they're upset about it, then you didn't bring the truth, right? But I think it's much more nuanced than that. And I think like division is like a big hot button word in church, but I think and like confusion is another big hot button word. But again, like I look at what Jesus did, and you're telling me he didn't bring division and confusion to some people?
Dude, he literally says it. He says it in one of his big like monologues or whatever, where he's like, what does he say? I can't remember like the verse exactly, but he says, gosh, I don't want to misquote this, but he says like, I have come to like divide. It's when he's talking to the disciples, and he's saying like mom, like parents will be separated from son or whatever. Like,
didn't come to bring peace, but a sword. Like, there's these very, very blatant dichotomies that he talks about. That I feel like we only leave out. We leave out one side of that. We only talk about him coming with love. We only talk about him coming with unity. Those are like the only things we talk about. And it's like, okay, but are we teaching how to challenge with love? Are we teaching how to disrupt with respect? Because if we're not, then we're saying that like Jesus overturning the tables that one time, you're saying that he did that imperfectly. But Jesus did not sin. He did not sin. And so I think, again, like it comes down to the matter of the heart, yes, in conjunction with how you're being perceived, right? Because you could have the best heart in the world, but if you're being perceived incorrectly, like you do have some aspect of control over that. And so I think that's my pushback to that. When people say like, oh, like you brought division or confusion or da-da-da-da, it's like, what's wrong with people asking questions? Are you afraid of them asking questions?
And really, I mean, man, that word division, that is not like, that is something that you are in complete control of. Like, as far as I'm like, when you present in any argument, if I'm arguing with you about like what freaking restaurant I want to go to for dinner, it's like, if you disagree with me, there's no division between our friendship. Like that is that's held over everything else. Like we're having a disagreement. Like, so to say that, like, and both of us, I mean, it's a mutual effort, but mutually we are in complete control of that. To divide, like, that's not something that just happens. And so that's something that hopefully we can really try to convey in like the things that we are saying, whatever, like these ideas that we present to people is like, you're not trying to divide people here. Like we just have a disagreement on what is being taught and what's being, I guess like how the church is like practicing this Christian faith, right? Like, that doesn't mean, we're trying to deconstruct. So,
and on confusion, I mean, how many people were confused about what Jesus was saying?
Oh my gosh, the disciples, how often were they confused by what he was saying? I mean, almost throughout the entire Gospels, like they have, they're just reeling for answers.
Literally almost constantly confused about what's going on. There's like, well, I just know I'm supposed to follow him. And like when Jesus says, eat my flesh and drink my blood, how many of those freaking followers were like, deuces, that is really confusing. I ain't about that cannibal life. I'm out of here. And Jesus looked over at his closest friends, his disciples, and he said, are you going to leave too? You're telling me he cared more about growth in that moment? About the growth of his following? Really? Because it sounds like he was ready to be solo again and start from scratch. That's what he was prepared to do.
Dude, there's a time when he's like, they just finished feeding the 5,000. And then I think he fed the 4,000 or something, and they're going back on a boat over the river or the lake or whatever. And he says something about he's like, watch out for the Pharisees and like their yeast, right? Like it, it like corrupts. Like everything, whatever, right? But the disciples, they're conversing with themselves, trying to figure out like what he's talking about, because they thought he was talking about bread. And Jesus is like, how, like, when are you going to understand that I'm not talking about bread? Like, But yeah, that's what happens when that principle that we talked about at the very beginning, Eric Weinstein, dude, that quote, like when there's no effort to try and understand each other, then that's like, I mean, that's a recipe for division right there. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, but you were saying high points. There were some people that the message definitely resonated with.
Mm-hmm.
So, but honestly, dude, that's like the whole thing with this is, sometimes it is like I want to be careful myself to not. It's so easy to make these things become about ourselves.
Yeah.
And like even just, I don't want to make it a numbers game either.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, dude, we got like 3 people to like to, I don't know, agree with us, whatever, right?
Yeah, true.
But that's not our goal. Like our goal is to empower believers. That's like what this whole thing is about, right? Like to empower believers and make disciples of Christ. That's the goal of a Christian. So, and if we are getting it completely wrong,
I'm open to that.
we're open to that. So,
Let us know.
we'll consider it.
Book a Zoom call.
Yeah.
Send an email.
Join the podcast.
Yeah. All right. Well,
dude, it is hot.
I'm sweating right
in
now.
here. I'm sweating too, bro.
We do this for you guys.
It's like 100 degree Texas weather.
Outside, yeah. It's probably
We have no AC in here.
It's like a nice 80 in here. Swell 80. Just a fan like blowing directly on us would make such a difference. I don't know why we haven't got one yet.
I know.
We're so stubborn.
Well,
next week's going to be hopefully, very interesting.
Change of scenery.
That's what I was looking for. But until next time, thanks for tuning in on the Second Floor Experience podcast. Peace out.
Peace. I need to take a shower.
Crap.
I want to talk to you. Not now. Later. No, now.